The golden facade. The autumn breeze carried the scent of maple and cinnamon as Nathaniel Foster guided his son Theodore through the park. At 42, Nathaniel's dark hair had begun to gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that complemented his thoughtful green eyes. 3 years had passed since cancer had taken his wife Rebecca, leaving him to raise their son alone. "Hiya, Dad!" Theodore called from the swing, his small legs pumping furiously against the air. At 8 years old, Theo was a miniature version of his father. Same curious eyes, same determined chin, though his hair was a warm auburn like his mother's. "You're going to reach the clouds at this rate," Nathaniel laughed, giving another push. These weekend outings had become their ritual, precious hours carved out of Nathaniel's demanding schedule at the architecture firm. "Excuse me?" came a melodious voice. "I think this little guy dropped this." Nathaniel turned to find a woman holding Theodore's blue knit hat. Her smile was radiant against her olive skin, dark curls framing a heart-shaped face. Something in her warm brown eyes made Nathaniel momentarily forget how to speak. "Thanks," he finally managed. "Theo would have been devastated if we'd lost that." "My aunt made it," Theodore explained, slowing his swing. "Before she went to heaven with Mom?" The woman's expression softened. "Then it's definitely a treasure worth keeping." She introduced herself as Camille Winters, a pediatric nurse new to Ridgemont. That chance meeting led to coffee the following week, then dinner the week after. Camille was vivacious and attentive, listening intently to Nathaniel's stories about his architectural projects and laughing genuinely at his admittedly terrible jokes. "You're the first person who's made me feel like myself again," Nathaniel confessed one evening as they walked along the riverfront, city lights reflecting in the water. "And you're the first man who's seen me as more than just a pretty face," Camille replied, squeezing his hand. When Nathaniel finally introduced Camille to Theodore over pizza and board games, he watched anxiously for his son's reaction. To his relief, Theo warmed to her quickly, especially when she revealed her impressive knowledge of dinosaurs, his current obsession. Pteranodons weren't technically dinosaurs, Theodore had corrected her seriously, to which Camille had responded not with adult condescension, but with genuine interest. "You're absolutely right. They were flying reptiles. I'm impressed you know that distinction." By Christmas, 6 months after their first meeting, Camille had become a fixture in their lives. She brought color and laughter back to their home, homemade cookies appearing in Theodore's lunchbox, thoughtful gifts left on Nathaniel's desk, family movie nights with popcorn battles and fort building. "She's wonderful, Nate," his sister Olivia remarked during the holiday gathering. "Theo seems happy." "We both are," Nathaniel replied, watching as Camille helped Theodore arrange a train set under the tree. "I didn't think I'd ever find this again." In February, Camille moved in. The transition was remarkably smooth, her belongings fitting into their home as effortlessly as she had fit into their lives. She transformed Nathaniel's bachelor basic decor with tasteful touches. Throw pillows, framed photographs, potted herbs on the kitchen windowsill. "We're a family now," Camille whispered one night as they watched Theodore sleep, his dinosaur nightlight casting prehistoric shadows across his peaceful face. Nathaniel kissed her forehead. "I never thought I'd be this lucky twice in one lifetime." From the outside, they appeared to be the perfect family, the successful architect, the caring nurse, and the bright dinosaur-loving boy. Nathaniel's colleagues commented on his renewed energy, the spring returning to his step. Theodore's teachers noted his improved focus in class. Everything was golden in the light of their new beginning, or so it seemed. Whispers and bruises. The first signs were subtle, so subtle that Nathaniel initially attributed them to normal childhood development. Theodore's dinosaur encyclopedia gathered dust on his bookshelf. His animated breakfast stories about pteranodons and velociraptors dwindled into monosyllabic responses. When Nathaniel asked about school, Theodore would shrug and say, "It was fine," his eyes fixed on his plate rather than meeting his father's gaze. "Kids go through phases," Camille assured him one evening as they washed dishes together. "He's probably just adjusting to our new family dynamic." "Give him time," Nathaniel wanted to believe her. After all, Camille was the professional, the one who worked with children every day. And in many ways, life had never been more organized. Meals appeared like clockwork, the house remained immaculate, and Theodore's homework was always completed before Nathaniel returned from work. Camille had even redecorated Theodore's room with a sophisticated space theme, replacing the childish dinosaur posters with educational charts of the solar system. "I thought he might like something more mature," she explained when Nathaniel questioned the change. "Besides, those posters were falling apart." "This is much nicer, don't you think?" The dinosaur toys had mysteriously disappeared too, replaced by educational puzzles and books that Camille deemed more appropriate. When Nathaniel mentioned getting new dinosaur figures, Camille sighed with practiced patience. "Nathaniel, he needs to expand his interests. You don't want him to be that weird kid obsessed with one thing, do you? Trust me on this." And he did trust her, until the day Theodore flinched when Camille reached to straighten his collar. It was such a small gesture. If Olivia hadn't been visiting that Sunday, Nathaniel might have missed it entirely. But later, as they washed dishes while Camille took Theodore shopping, his sister broached the subject carefully. "Have you noticed Theo seems different lately?" Nathaniel scrubbed a pot with unnecessary vigor. "He's growing up. Kids change." "This isn't about growing up, Nate. He barely spoke during lunch. And did you see how he reacted when Camille touched him?" "She's been wonderful for us, Liv." "I'm not saying she hasn't." Olivia hesitated. "But something feels off. Last week when I picked him up from school, he asked if he could come live with me and Uncle Daniel. He was joking, but it didn't feel like a joke." Nathaniel dismissed his sister's concerns, but her words lingered like an echo. That night, he noticed Theodore's reluctance to be alone with Camille when bedtime approached. The boy's eyes followed Nathaniel anxiously as he moved around the kitchen. "Can you read me a story tonight, Dad?" Theodore asked, his voice smaller than usual. "Daddy's tired, sweetheart," Camille interrupted smoothly. "I'll read to you like always." "I want Dad," Theodore insisted, a tremor in his voice. Camille's smile remained fixed, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "That's not very nice after I spent all day making your favorite dinner. Didn't we talk about being grateful?" Theodore's shoulders slumped. "Sorry, Camille." "That's better," she said, her voice honey-sweet again. "Now go brush your teeth." When Theodore left the room, Nathaniel approached her. "I don't mind reading to him tonight." "You're too soft with him," Camille sighed. "He needs structure, boundaries. That's why he's been acting out at school." "Acting out? This is the first I've heard of this." Camille waved dismissively. "Nothing serious. Just not paying attention, being disruptive. His teacher mentioned it when I picked him up yesterday. I didn't want to bother you with it." The next morning, Nathaniel deliberately arrived early at Theodore's school, catching Ms. Harlow before class began. "I wanted to discuss Theo's behavior issues," he started. The teacher looked puzzled. "Behavior issues? Theodore's one of my quietest students. If anything, I'd like to see him participate more. He used to be so eager to share his dinosaur facts with the class." Driving to work, Nathaniel's mind raced. Why would Camille invent problems that didn't exist? And more disturbing, what else might she have fabricated? That afternoon, he left work early without telling Camille. As he pulled into their driveway, he noticed Theodore sitting alone on the front step, hugging his knees despite the spring chill. "Buddy, why are you outside?" Theodore looked up, eyes widening in surprise. "Dad, you're home early. Why aren't you inside?" "Where's Camille?" "She said I needed to think about my behavior." His son's voice wavered. "I spilled my juice at lunch." Something cold settled in Nathaniel's stomach. "How long have you been out here?" Theodore shrugged. "Since I got home from school?" It had been over 2 hours. The uncovered truth. The locked drawer in Nathaniel's home office contained things he rarely needed: Rebecca's death certificate, insurance policies, their marriage license. Now it held something else, a small surveillance camera he'd purchased after finding Theodore outside that day. He told himself he was being paranoid, that there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Theodore had exaggerated. Maybe Camille had only stepped out for a moment. But the seed of doubt had taken root. and Nathaniel couldn't shake the growing discrepancy between the Camille he knew and the troubling signs he'd begun to notice. Theodore's missing possessions, the fabricated school problems, the flinching. "I need to travel to Portland for the Westridge project," he told Camille on Thursday morning. "Just overnight. I'll be back tomorrow evening." Camille's face fell in practiced disappointment. "We'll miss you terribly." "Won't we, Theodore?" Theodore nodded silently, pushing cereal around his bowl. Nathaniel kissed them both goodbye, his heart heavy with the deception. There was no Portland trip. Instead, he checked into a hotel across town and activated the remote viewing app connected to the camera he'd hidden in a bookshelf in the living room. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. Camille helped Theodore with homework, her voice patient and kind. But when Theodore struggled with a math problem, asking for help a second time, the transformation was jarring. "Are you stupid?" Camille snapped, her beautiful face contorting. "I just showed you how to do this." "Pay attention!" Theodore hunched over his paper. "I'm sorry, I'm trying." "Not hard enough," she hissed. "Your father works all day to provide for us and you can't even do simple math? What would he think if he knew how lazy you really are?" Nathaniel watched in horror as the scene unfolded, Camille's voice alternating between vicious criticism and mocking sweetness, Theodore growing smaller with each verbal assault. When the boy accidentally knocked over a glass of water, Camille grabbed his arm roughly. "That's it. No dinner tonight. Maybe hunger will help you be more careful." Nathaniel could barely breathe as he watched his son trudge upstairs, shoulders slumped in defeat. The Camille on screen poured herself a glass of wine, her movements relaxed as if she hadn't just terrorized an 8-year-old child. She made a phone call, laughing brightly. "No, everything's fine. Nathaniel's away for work, so it's just me and the brat. I know. The things we do for security, right? At least his father has money." Nathaniel sat in the darkened hotel room, numb with shock and self-recrimination. How long had this been happening? How had he been so blind? The camera continued to record through the evening. Camille eating dinner alone, watching television, checking on Theodore only to berate him for making noise when he dropped a book. At 9:30 the next morning, while Theodore was at school, Nathaniel walked through his own front door. Camille looked up from her magazine, surprised. "Nathaniel, you're home early. How was Portland?" "There was no Portland trip," he said quietly, placing his phone on the coffee table, the surveillance app open and playing. "I needed to see what happens when I'm not here." Camille's expression shifted from confusion to outrage as she recognized the footage. "You spied on me? In my own home?" "My home," Nathaniel corrected. "My son, who you've been abusing." "Abuse? Don't be ridiculous." She forced a laugh. "I was just being firm. Children need discipline, Nathaniel." "You're too soft with him." "I saw everything, Camille. I heard what you said about me, about my money." Her face hardened, the mask falling away completely. "What did you expect? That I'd actually want to play mommy to some other woman's brat? Please. Men like you are all the same, thinking your checkbook can buy you a ready-made family. I want you gone by the time Theodore gets home from school. Take your things and leave the key. You'll regret this," she warned, her voice ice-cold. "Theodore needs a mother." "No," Nathaniel replied. "He needs safety and love. 2 things you've deprived him of. Now get out of our home." When Camille left 3 hours later, dragging 2 suitcases behind her, Nathaniel felt hollow rather than triumphant. He'd failed to protect his son. He'd invited a predator into their lives, and now he had to somehow repair the damage done. Healing wounds. "Theo hates me," Nathaniel confessed to Dr. Eleanor Wilson during their private session. 6 weeks had passed since Camille's departure, and they'd settled into a routine of weekly therapy, individual sessions for both father and son, plus joint sessions to rebuild their relationship. Dr. Wilson adjusted her glasses. "Why do you believe that?" "Because I brought her into our lives. I chose someone who hurt him, and I didn't see it happening. The guilt was a constant companion, waking with him each morning, haunting his dreams at night." "Have you asked Theodore how he feels?" Nathaniel shook his head. "I'm afraid of the answer." When Theodore joined them for the family portion of the session, Dr. Wilson guided them through an exercise she called truth bridges, creating safe spaces for difficult conversations. "Theodore," she said gently, "can you tell your dad how you felt when Camille was living with you?" The boy twisted the hem of his shirt, eyes downcast. "Scared all the time. Why were you scared?" Nathaniel asked, his heart breaking. "Because I had to be perfect or she'd get angry. And I was never perfect enough." Theodore's voice quavered. "She said if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, that you loved her more than me." Nathaniel moved to sit beside his son. "I could never love anyone more than you, buddy. And I will always, always believe you. Even when I make mistakes? Especially then," Nathaniel promised. "Mistakes are how we learn." The healing process was neither quick nor linear. There were nightmares that sent Theodore scrambling into Nathaniel's bedroom at 3 a.m., panic attacks triggered by unexpected sounds, days when the boy barely spoke. But there were also breakthroughs. The afternoon Theodore asked if they could visit the Natural History Museum, his cautious excitement as they explored the dinosaur exhibit. Nathaniel made changes too. He reduced his hours at the architecture firm, prioritizing afternoon pickups from school and unrushed bedtime stories. He reached out to Olivia, acknowledging that she had seen what he had missed and asking for her continued support. Most importantly, he listened, really listened, when Theodore spoke, validating his feelings rather than minimizing them. "Why did you make her leave?" Theodore asked one evening as they assembled a Stegosaurus model. Nathaniel considered his answer carefully. "Because she wasn't kind to you. And someone who isn't kind to you can't be part of our family." "Even though you loved her?" "I thought I loved her," Nathaniel corrected. "But real love doesn't hurt people. Real love makes you feel safe." By summer, Theodore had regained enough confidence to attend dinosaur camp, where he made 2 new friends who shared his passion for paleontology. His nightmares became less frequent. He laughed more easily. The wounded child was still there beneath the surface, but so was the resilient, curious boy Nathaniel had always known. On the anniversary of Camille's departure, Nathaniel found Theodore in the backyard, digging enthusiastically in a patch of dirt. "What are you looking for, paleontologist Foster?" he asked, crouching beside his son. Theodore grinned, holding up a muddy toy triceratops. "I buried my dinosaurs last year," he explained, "to keep them safe from Camille. I'm excavating them now." Nathaniel helped him unearth the hidden collection, a dozen plastic figures Theodore had secretly preserved when his other toys disappeared. As they washed the mud from each prehistoric creature, Nathaniel marveled at his son's resourcefulness, his quiet resistance in the face of cruelty. "You're the bravest person I know," he told Theodore that night as they arranged the rescued dinosaurs on a shelf. Theodore considered this. "I was scared a lot." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Nathaniel explained. "It means you keep going even when you are scared," Theodore nodded solemnly. "Then you're brave too, Dad, for making her leave even though you were sad." Nathaniel pulled his son close, recognizing the truth in his words. They were both healing, both learning to trust again, one dinosaur, one bedtime story, one honest conversation at a time. A new chapter. 2 years had passed since the shadows had lifted from their home. Theodore, now 10, had grown 3 inches and developed an encyclopedic knowledge of both dinosaurs and marine biology, his newest fascination. Nathaniel had found his stride as a single father, balancing work and parenthood with a confidence he'd once thought impossible. They hadn't merely survived Camille's brief, destructive presence in their lives, they had rebuilt something stronger in its wake. Their relationship had deepened, fortified by hard-earned trust and open communication. On a crisp October afternoon, Nathaniel sat on a bench at the community center, watching Theodore's swim class through the observation window. The boy moved through the water with newfound grace, his backstroke improving weekly under Coach Marquez's guidance. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Nathaniel looked up to find a woman gesturing to the empty space beside him. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with chestnut hair pulled into a practical bun and laugh lines crinkling around her eyes. Unlike Camille's calculated perfection, there was something comfortably authentic about her, from her mismatched socks to the paint smudges on her cardigan. "Please," he said, moving his jacket. "Are you here for swim class?" "Art class, actually," she replied, setting down a portfolio case. "I teach the children's illustration workshop next door. Josephine Reeves, Nathaniel Foster. My son Theodore is the one attempting a backstroke and looking like he's battling sea monsters instead." Josephine laughed, a genuine, unself-conscious sound. "A creative interpretation of swimming. I approve." Their conversation flowed easily, interrupted only when Theodore emerged from the locker room, hair damp and eyes bright with accomplishment. "Dad, did you see my backstroke? Coach says I'm getting better." "You were amazing, buddy. This is Miss Reeves. She teaches art next door to your swim class." Theodore assessed Josephine with the direct curiosity of childhood. "What kind of art do you teach?" "All kinds, but my favorite is illustration. Drawing pictures that tell stories." Theodore's eyes widened. "Like in books?" "Exactly like in books. In fact, I've illustrated several children's books about—" "Not dinosaurs, right?" Nathaniel interrupted with a rueful smile. "We have enough of those at home to open a library." Josephine's eyes twinkled. "Actually, my last project was a children's book about marine paleontology, prehistoric ocean creatures." "So technically dinosaur adjacent," Theodore gasped. "You mean like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs?" "Precisely those," Josephine confirmed, clearly delighted by his enthusiasm. "Would you like to see some of my sketches sometime?" And so began a friendship, cautious at first, then increasingly comfortable. Josephine joined them for pizza after Thursday swim classes. She introduced Theodore to watercolors and charcoal techniques. When he developed an obsession with drawing prehistoric sea creatures, she encouraged him with genuine interest rather than forced enthusiasm. Unlike Camille, Josephine never tried to insert herself as a maternal figure. She was simply herself, sometimes scattered, unfailingly honest, and genuinely fond of both Nathaniel and Theodore on their own terms. "She's different," Theodore observed one evening after Josephine had joined them for a museum excursion. "Different how?" Nathaniel asked, trying to sound casual as he loaded the dishwasher. Theodore considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "She listens. Really listens. And she doesn't pretend to like things just because we like them." It was true. Josephine had cheerfully admitted her ignorance about certain dinosaur species, but showed genuine fascination with Theodore's knowledge. She'd confessed a mild fear of swimming, but cheered enthusiastically from the sidelines at his first competition. 6 months into their friendship, Nathaniel finally gathered the courage to ask her to dinner, just the two of them. "I was wondering when you'd ask," Josephine said with a smile. "I've been dropping hints for weeks." Their relationship evolved with careful deliberation. Nathaniel was transparent with Theodore about each step, watchful for any signs of discomfort. But the boy seemed to blossom in Josephine's presence, sharing his thoughts and creations with increasing confidence. On a summer camping trip, their first overnight adventure as a trio, Nathaniel watched as Josephine and Theodore hunched over a sketchbook by the campfire, collaborating on an illustrated story about a time-traveling paleontologist. Their heads were bent together, faces illuminated by the golden light, completely absorbed in their shared creation. Later, with Theodore asleep in the tent, Nathaniel and Josephine sat beneath a canopy of stars. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing him, really seeing him. For letting him be exactly who he is." Josephine's hand found his in the darkness. "That's not something that deserves thanks, Nathaniel. It's just love. Love." The word no longer frightened him as it once had. He'd learned its true meaning, not in grand gestures or perfect appearances, but in consistent kindness, in genuine interest, in the courage to be authentically present. 1 year later, when Josephine moved into their home, it wasn't with the whirlwind immediacy of Camille's arrival, but with thoughtful integration. Theodore helped her arrange her art supplies in the spare room they'd converted into a studio. She helped him create a detailed mural of the Mesozoic ocean on his bedroom wall. There were adjustments and occasional tensions, as in any blended family. But beneath it all ran a current of mutual respect, the foundation they'd built together, Piece by piece, day by day, on Josephine's birthday, Theodore presented her with a handmade card featuring a meticulous drawing of the three of them surrounded by various prehistoric creatures. Inside, he'd written, "To Josephine, who makes our home complete. Love, Theodore. Do you think Mom would mind?" he asked Nathaniel later that night during their bedtime routine. "That I love Josephine, too?" Nathaniel sat on the edge of his son's bed, surrounded by the evidence of Theodore's evolving passions, dinosaur models sharing space with marine biology books and art supplies. "Your mom wanted you to be happy and loved," he answered truthfully. "That's what all good parents want for their children. Love isn't a limited resource, buddy. It grows to include all the people who matter to us." Theodore nodded, processing this idea. "Like how I'll always love dinosaurs best, but I also really love drawing and swimming now, too." Nathaniel laughed. Exactly like that. As he turned out the light, leaving the glow-in-the-dark stars Josephine had helped Theodore arrange into accurate constellations, Nathaniel reflected on their journey. The pain Camille had inflicted hadn't defined them. Instead, it had taught them resilience, shown them their own strength, and ultimately led them to a more authentic happiness, one built not on appearances or expectations, but on the bedrock of genuine love. Outside Theodore's room, Josephine waited in the hallway, a mug of tea in each hand. Her smile, honest, imperfect, real, warmed him from within. "Ready for movie night?" she asked, passing him a steaming mug. "Absolutely," he replied, taking her free hand in his. Together, they walked toward their shared future, step by careful step, building something beautiful from the shadows they'd survived.